Welcome back. Now we are talking about APIs, the optional content. In this video, I just want to spend a few minutes talking about how to access Twitter API. Um, the thing about Twitter is that they're very protective of the data, and so they have a very complex way of authenticating the user. But what I mean is that you basically have to have 4 different kinds of uh, keys here, and you need to use it to authenticate yourself, and only then will Twitter allow you access to their data. Okay, and even though it looks kind of complicated, it's actually quite easy. So if you do a Google search on, let's say, I'm just going to go here. If you do a Google search on Twitter, okay, OAUTH, OAuth, right, FAQ, should take you to a page, right? So OAuth FAQ, and again, you don't need, this is the name of the authentication scheme. Okay, it's elegant, but can be a bit confusing. But thankfully for us, we don't need to know what it is. All we need to know is that you need to authenticate yourself to be able to access Twitter's data, right? Which means you need to have, first of all, a Twitter account. If you don't have one, you need to create one. And second, to be able to access Twitter's data, I mean, it's going to assume that, let's say you're an application developer, trying to take in the data, for some use. So you need to click on this link right here, DEV for developer, dev.twitter.com/apps. Let me click on this. It's going to take you to another link, and you actually see that I've created an app already, right? Again, it's nothing complicated. All you need to do is click on this button, create new app. You don't have to do anything more. So I did that, and in the process of creating this app, right, it's basically going to walk you through this process where it's going to give you these 4 keys: manage keys and access tokens. So if I click on this, right, or I click on this, I should be able to see those 4 keys that I showed you before, right? I'm not clicking on it simply because some of these keys are private, and you shouldn't be seeing my private keys like a password. And you'll also notice that I put in a generic website. It's going to ask you for a URL. Just put in a generic name. We are not really developing an application here. We're just basically giving Twitter some information about us. It's assuming that we will at some point in time develop an application or a website that will use the data that we're taking from Twitter. Okay, that's all. So this is actually quite easy to do. At the end of this process, you should have keys and those access tokens, overall 4 in number. Okay, and they look somewhat like this. Okay, again, I modified this. Obviously these are not valid, but they should look something like this, and I assign them to a global variable. If you remember, assign them to a variable, of course, but I use the global variable so I can recall, I can kind of identify them wherever they are. Okay, if you want, you can call them obviously X, Y, Z, A, I don't care. I like to give them descriptive names, and I use all caps to indicate that it's a global variable. Okay, and then the next step is basically you could use these keys to authenticate yourself directly with Twitter. For example, I did a search on Twitter APIs. Let me go back so you can follow the path. I did a Google search on Twitter API, and it took me to this page. I clicked on REST APIs here. It basically lists all possibilities in terms of what kind of data can I access from Twitter. Whole bunch of possibilities. Okay, let me just pick one that's easy to understand. Searching for a specific tweet. Maybe I want to search about, did someone say anything about Baruch College in the last hour, right? So I can search Baruch College. Okay, or I could search for pizza, best pizza in New York, whatever I want to search, right, on Twitter. So this gives you, for each of these things that I want to do, right, each of these things, I'm actually in one place here, search tweets. It has lots of documentation on how you would access the data. Okay, so first of all, it tells you that here's a URL you need to use. Again, similar to what we did before for OMDB and Netflix Relay. The difference here is that I cannot get this data directly over the web simply because I need to authenticate myself using those keys and tokens. Okay, so it also tells you that it's JSON format, right? It requires authentication, so you need to authenticate yourself. So I may be able to do that from scratch using Python, but thankfully for us, I'm going to introduce you to another package that allows you to do it very easily. Okay, so bear with me for a second here while I show you that. So in this case, for searching, obviously you need to specify the query. What do you want to search? You could search at the username if you want, right? You can even do a hashtag something, or you could just say pizza, Baruch College. So that is required, right? And many other things here are optional. You can specify language if you want, English, Russian, geocode if you want to specify, I only want tweets in this specific neighborhood. I can do that, right? So here you see all different possibilities. One interesting thing to know is that I can also say give a count. This is basically going to tell you how many tweets do you want to return, because sometimes when you type in pizza, there could be literally thousands of tweets, if not thousands, hundreds of tweets. Maybe I don't want all of the data, right? So for me, at least, when I'm showing you, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to be saying count of 2, count of 3, never 1, because I want to see what the structure of the Google Twitter's responses, but usually 2 or more, 2, 3, 4, specify a number. So you don't get too little, you at least get 2, but don't, if you don't specify this, sometimes you may end up getting 100 results, and it could take up the entire web page, the entire page on Jupyter Notebook. Okay, so like this, each of these things, right, get statuses, lookup. Each of these APIs have their own resource, web resource, right, and information on parameters. So you can read up on them to your heart's content based on what your needs are. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to say that there is this package called Twitter API. Okay, so what you can do is you can actually install this package on Python. And again, I'm going to upload a very short video that shows you how to install packages, and I'm going to use this example. How do you install Twitter API? Okay, so if you're not sure about that, you can watch that video. It's actually quite easy, and it mentions it here. I believe at the bottom here they say go to the command line on Mac, that's a terminal, right, or the corresponding one on Windows. Just type in pip install Twitter API, you're done. As simple as that. Okay, so once you have that, then you might be able to come back to Jupyter Notebook here, and you might say, and you want to use this from Twitter API, import Twitter API. So I'm importing this package. Okay, so if you had installed it properly, right, and once you have your keys and tokens and you assign them appropriately, the great thing about Twitter API is that it provides you with a method for me to authenticate myself. So the method's name is Twitter API, open bracket, those 4 keys, I specify the global variables here, close brackets, and assign it to a variable. I'm done. So I'm authenticated and I'm in. Okay, so let's see if this works. In this case, I'm just going to comment this out because this is actually code, Python code for posting a tweet on your Twitter account. Okay, and I actually did this a few minutes ago, and I think I have my account here. Let me type in twitter.com, and you can actually see that 1 hour ago, this very tweet was posted. So I posted this using this code here. Okay, so let me run this. And again, by the way, I commented this out because I ran this separately. I'm not showing you that, right? I ran this separately, and so all of these variables have the actual values that should be valid, right? So let me run this. So I did not get any error messages, so everything seems to be good, right? And so for example, I talked about Twitter, on Twitter, I talked about the search tweets. Let me go back one more page, right? Using this URL. So again, this Twitter API, all you need to do is, if it's search tweets, you just copy and paste this. If we go up here, search, so it's actually it very closely mirrors what the request for Twitter API is, right? So instead of typing in this resource URL, all you need to do is put this in quotes. That's it. The same would apply for everything else. If you want, for example, we go back here, status as lookup, don't type the URL, instead just use this, because the package allows you to specify this. It's going to do the hard work for you behind the scenes, including authenticating you. Okay, so let me go back here. So for search tweets, because that's what Python said, search tweets, I put this in quotes and then comma, I specify the parameters in a dictionary. The search query term is Baruch College, and as I mentioned, I'm going to specify a count of 2. I don't want too many, just in case too many people are talking about Baruch College, then I do not want to have all of it here. And all I need to do is, I don't quite know what R is, right? But I'm taking my chance here. Let's see, I'm going to go back here. You can always just print R, right? Print R and see what comes up. But let me see if this works. I know what's coming up, so I'm going to comment this out. Okay. So let me run this, and you see that it's actually a dictionary with lots and lots of keys and values. The second entry is here. Okay. Again, this is a lot of information. So what you might want to do is, again, go back to Twitter, look at it, they have more information. I'm going to go back one more here. They actually give you this information in a really nicely formatted way. So you can look at what the example code or JSON object looks like. And this is how I knew what I was going to get back. Okay. So you can actually look at all the information, right? All the keys and its corresponding values that Twitter is going to give me back. Okay. So again, interesting. So in this case, maybe I don't want all of this, right? Maybe I want just the first key entities. So, I'm going to comment this up. Okay. So let's see what comes up. So basically I get the values associated with the key entities, right? And it gets printed twice. Okay. So the challenge here is for you to figure out, what all these keys mean. And we don't need to have the entire dictionary. So look at this here. Maybe there'll be something interesting. For example, maybe you're only interested in the text of the tweet, right? Or maybe you're interested in the friends count, something like that, right? So pick the ones that are meaningful to you and just print them out. And that's what processing this information is all about. Processing, APIs, and only keeping the ones you're interested in and throwing out the ones you don't want. Okay. All right. Now, the other beautiful thing about this is that instead of just doing item by item, and I didn't know this. Sometimes maybe you don't know what the structure is, right? Maybe it's a list, maybe it's a dictionary. And if it's a list or a dictionary, the way you would access would change, right? These data. So what this package, Twitter API, does is that they have this really nice method called rGetIterator that takes care of the complexity. You don't even need to know. You can just use, instead of for item in R, just say for item in r.get_iterator, open bracket, close bracket, you'd be fine. Okay. And you can still do, basically what I'm saying is that you can replace this with this. Okay. So I put it up here. But here, what I want to do is I want to do one other thing. I also noticed when it was printing the information, there is a text. By the way, Twitter uses text to represent the actual tweet. Okay. Maybe I want to extract the actual tweet that talks about Baruch College. All right. And maybe I don't know ahead of time whether the tweet is included as an output in this particular response, right? I don't know that. So all I need to do, again, if you think back to your dictionaries, I'm actually looking up a key. Is this key in this dictionary? If this is indeed a dictionary, and I know it's a dictionary, right? Then print item text. Let me try running this. So basically now I got tweet number 1, tweet number 2. right? So this is only 2 because I asked for 2. Okay, so there are many different ways of processing it, but to process this, to do this, you need to know what the structure, internal structure, right, of this response. Okay, again, the other thing that you may probably notice is that this Python package, because you're using Twitter API, right, I'm not really getting a string back in quotes, so I don't have to load this into JSON. What I'm getting is already, sorry, I don't have to convert JSON to an internal Python structure. I'm already getting the output as Python structures, so I can start processing them right away. Okay, and that's what this Twitter API package, and they call themselves a wrapper around the actual Twitter that makes it easy for novice programmers like us, beginning programmers like us, to be able to get the data from Twitter. Okay, and there are lots of other competitors to this particular package. I recommend that you try using this because this is very simple to use, starting with authentication, right? And more importantly for me, it actually very closely mirrors the API requests for how you would ask Twitter for APIs. For example, if you're looking for search tweets, so you use this is your keyword, search/tweets, right? So instead of using a resource URL this, so you don't have to learn multiple methods. As long as you know what you're looking for by looking at this, it closely mirrors what Twitter is doing. Okay, so I have a few other commands here. For example, so there is something else called status as home line, right? Home timeline. So I can look for, what is it? Status as home timeline. So this should give you the documentation on what it is, right? So here's the resource URL. Since we are not doing it from scratch, I'm just going to copy and paste this, right? And that's my, right here is my specifying the resource, right? And internally the Twitter API would take this and replace it with the right URL. Okay, so you don't have to worry about it. And again, I'm also saying I only want a count of 2. I don't want too many. Okay, then I'm saying for item in R, get iterator. Again, if you want to know more about it, read the documentation for Twitter API. They have a really nice introduction. They have some example code, right? So continue going on. Just go page by page. Authentication, error handling, paging results. Not a whole lot of things. Tiny examples. You even have some examples that I'm actually using here. Okay, so the Twitter API has some documentation that's very useful. Okay, if you want to look at that. So now this is basically gets the home timeline, right? And I'm trying to print some information. I'm going to run this just to show you it can run. So I get some information, right? And if I don't want to do that, right, maybe I'm just going to delete this for the time being. Let's say I don't want to do this. Because again, I'm using this Twitter API, I can choose to directly access the Json instruction. So I can say this, same stuff, but it's going to give me information in a different, visually different way. That's all. So maybe I have a better sense of what it is. But again, if you really want to know what the output is, I'm not going to be looking at this page. Rather, I would look at this page because it's much better formatted at the very end. So I get the resource URL, right? What is it that I'm doing? Description, and then parameters, what is required and what's optional, and example result. Here's where I'm going to look at the structure. Here's where I'm going to look up at, in this case, it's not a dictionary, it's actually a list of dictionaries. So your processing will change based on this knowledge, okay? And I would look up at what kind of information I'm interested in and then start extracting that information, okay? And I would also say that, so this is all about Twitter. I'm not going to talk more about Twitter. And if you want to know more about, for example, Google API, I'm just going to copy and paste this so you can take a look at this. Lots of possibilities, okay? And in this case, you still need to get an API key from Google for many of these services. Again, it should be pretty simple, right? If you want geocoding, it explains what it is. It tells you, it tells you what you need to do. You need to get a key, so go through the steps. It also tells you usage limits. Twitter, you just need to look around. Twitter will also have usage limits. So do not abuse the privilege of using the data, because most of them are providing this for free. We want to be mindful of it. Okay, in this case they tell you what Google is very clear. They tells you by using standard API you can make 2500 free requests, but you still need a key. Okay, the old days, few years ago, you didn't need a key, but they changed it of late. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So this really brings to an end our module on the Twitter API. And of course, another option for you is also Facebook. So try different things. If you want to do something, I mean, to me, Twitter would be an example of a more complex project, but still, you can keep it simple by just examining the structure, right, and then trying to extract just specific items, within that structure. Okay, so it should be doable. It's not that hard, and you can always make it as complex as you want it, but it's very doable. Okay, so this brings to an end the tutorial on APIs, and specifically Twitter APIs. And hopefully, again, I'm saying this at the very end, but hopefully you notice that this is optional, Twitter API. So I won't be testing this for the exam. Okay, thank you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.